couldn't believe that a studio wanted to make Beetlejuice because it didn't really fit into any kind of category. It was strange. I think what intrigued me is I liked the world. It was just a very open canvas, so to speak. I think that's what I was drawn to because it sort of fit into my sensibility, whatever that was. I made things just because I liked it or something connected to me. I never had any magic feeling like, oh, this is going to be this or that. It was just the chemistry was right and the elements were right. And luckily, because it was sort of lowish budget, it was sort of under the radar. When you're starting out, you have the beautiful luxury of not knowing what you're doing, you know? And so that can sometimes be a benefit. At that time, I was lucky enough to work with a bunch of people that we all kind of connected. So that's the sort of chemistry or alchemy of making a movie.
I need you to tell me what this means.
Oh, well, let's have a look, shall we?
A sequel had been talked about for 30 years or whatever, right? And so nothing ever really clicked, but I think the time was actually very important to it because the thing that interested me about this was, seeing what happened to these characters, the Dietz family, all these years later, especially like Lydia, it was a character that I really liked, and I thought that time gap just made it more interesting and emotional to me. So that was what really made me want to revisit it.
It's been in the works for a very long time. I would say over 10 years, Tim's been talking about it with Michael and Catherine and Winona, and there's been ideas floated around, but it's taken that long for us to kind of get to where we are today.
For a long time, he and I thought, don't touch it until we figured out what we thought we should do. Privately, frankly, behind the scenes, he and I would talk about it now and then and get on the phone, discuss it. And then people started to kind of pitch things and nothing was really working.
Everything was very sort of top secret. Every year or two, I'd see Tim and we'd get into a huddle and we'd talk about it.
I had a meeting with Tim, feels like 5 years ago, I think. And he said he really wanted to do it. Then would talk to him, email once in a while throughout the years. And, there were rumors going around that Beetlejuice 2 was going to happen. And I don't know.
Tim and I were in Romania shooting Wednesday and having a conversation one night after dinner. He said, I know what I want to do next. I want to do Beetlejuice. And that kicked off a conversation, which led to him to call the cast. And within a week, we were sitting down with the writers and pitching a story.
We were on the set of Wednesday, and we would meet with Tim every morning and kind of go through the scenes. Then we got a call that he wanted to meet us after wrap one night.
Which is highly unusual.
Highly unusual. We were like, I hope nothing's wrong. And we went in to the trailer, and Tim told us he wanted to do a Beetlejuice sequel. It's the movie that people come up and ask him about the most. And he felt like if he didn't do it now, he wouldn't do it. And then we went off and sort of crafted a story and then came back and pitched it to him, and he loved it, and then we went in and wrote the movie. So for us, it was an incredibly simple development process because you were writing for an audience of one, which was Tim Burton.
Jesus, bub. Can't you see him concentrating here?
I never really understood the success of the first movie anyway. So in coming up with a sequel, nothing really connected with me. So it really had to do with feeling this connection with Lydia, basically. And I remember at the time, I remember feeling those feelings and having those thoughts. And then as you go on, it's interesting to see what stays the same, what changes, where you grow, where you stagnate, what happens in your relationships. So all those things was very, very, for me, made it more emotional and made it more personal and made it something that through this world you could explore those things.
Once Tim got the script to where he was happy with it and we addressed his notes, then he gave it to Michael to read, because that obviously was the next big audience that had to
Yeah, because if Michael didn't like it, there was no movie.
There was no movie.
This is a hard thing to write because a lot of it was just created by he and I and Catherine and the cast and people, really. So to do that again is really hard. And we had seen over the years script here and there. They weren't terrible, but they didn't get it.
It's honoring the first movie, making sure that Beetlejuice's voice felt authentic, and he had evolved as a character, but it still felt like a real tribute to the work they'd done in the first movie. So I think Michael was surprised when he was reading the script, because a lot of that first script was improvised. Michael was like, wow, it sounds like Beetlejuice.
Shall we?
Now, once you get in that mindset, the likelihood of you being able to write something that fits what I'd done in the first one is stronger. So there was a lot that I went, oh, this is great. I'm just going to do this. This is funny.
What's interesting, and Tim was very clear about this, Beetlejuice in the first movie for 11 minutes. So he really wanted to minimize Beetlejuice, always like pulling back Beetlejuice. Too much Beetlejuice was always the note. So when you see him, it has incredible impact.
We can't say, oh, people really like him. We want more of him. I said it'd be a big mistake. Don't do that.
I didn't watch the first film going into this. I just kind of went into it with the feeling of wanting that spirit of creating that movie and how the cast kind of contributed into it and everybody doing, like I said, live effects with puppets and things and all the combination together. No blue screen, no digital effects, just sets, wardrobe, makeup, just going back to the roots of the spirit of how we made the first one.
The agreement we always had, if we ever did it, and it wasn't looking likely for a long, long time, was it couldn't be overwhelmed by technology. I don't think people consciously knew or know why they like it. It feels handmade, and that's because it literally was handmade. And what's so exciting about this one, we stuck to that deal.
If it didn't happen now, it wouldn't happen. And that's something Tim was honest about. He wanted to do it fast. He wanted to do it off the radar, very streamlined in doing it and getting Michael, Winona, and Catherine to sign on.
This idea had been kicking around for a long time. I guess we all have been like meeting in secret for 15 years, never really knowing if this was gonna happen. I mean, how many times did we almost have it happen, but there's clearly a reason that it had to be now. If it wasn't now, then it wouldn't be perfect. It's just perfect. I just remember turning to my partner, Scott, and saying, I think this is gonna happen for real.
Then all of a sudden, it seemed like they got it together in the last few months. Then we're here.
Should the camera be there? And then I sit? Just like a second after you set.
I was nervous, really nervous, because that choice that I made, that's a big leap. That's a risky move, you know, it happened to have worked. So then you go, oh geez, can I pull that off again after all these years?
He tapped right back into it. It was kind of amazing. It was like going to a weird wedding or funeral or a reunion or something. It was very strange to see all this coming back to life and beautiful for me.
Way more pressure on this one. We really didn't want to mess this up. We really didn't want people to say, man, you had this thing. Why did you touch it? Why didn't you leave it alone? So I was very nervous about it and me.
We all felt very safe. We didn't feel like everyone was looking over our shoulder. And so it was a really beautiful, creative chaos, which is just a wonderful place to be. But I do think Jenna coming on was a huge gift.
I remember when I read the script, I was reading about all of these characters that I had grown up watching and had been so familiar with all my life, feeling really, really nostalgic and happy and just excited more than anything.
Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice, Beetlejuice.
The first day filming on the new Beetlejuice was very special because it took us a moment to get here.
It's always scary the first day, you know, before you open your mouth for the first time. You imagine what you'd like to have come out of your mouth, but you're not sure it's going to work that way, really.
There is an element of terror that I think we all had before each of our first days. There exists a text chain between Michael and Catherine and I. There was a lot of, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be okay, I promise.
My name is Lydia Dietz, and welcome to Ghost House.
The first day of filming was actually the beginning of the movie, where Lydia's doing her show and then she sort of sees Beetlejuice or is starting to have these visions.
I got goosebumps because you just didn't know what to expect. A lot of that scene has to do with how just eloquently Winona speaks, the tonality of her voice. It was magic. And I think they were all, to some extent, demonized and possessed by the spirit of Beetlejuice on day one.
It was also the first time seeing the sets, seeing the look, the aesthetic that Tim was establishing.
That's all Tim's heart, and it's such a beautiful playground of emotion and humor, and you get to live in it for that time, and it's just a really, really beautiful place to be.
I was just so blown away, sort of walking around it, sort of like going into a museum of Tim's mind and seeing the way everything had been realized, and you can't believe how much imagination has gone into it.
It's also very magic to get in those kind of sets because you are in a fantastic world right away. And this really helps as an actor.
When the world is really complete, it sets the rules for the pretending. It tells you how to behave. And here, as fantastical as the sets are, they've got such a sense of purpose and color and everything that once you get there, you say, oh, I know what this scene is about.
There's obviously nods to the original because the afterlife is the afterlife. You know, it doesn't change much. You know, we had some sets that were reminiscent of what we did because that was the world. But Bo Welsh was the designer on that, and I worked with Mark Scruton on this, who I worked with on Wednesday.
We had 4 sound stages at Leavesden, and I think last count it was like 68 sets. Digging into the original film and making sure that we were recreating the original sets as faithfully as we could. Sometimes that was easy, sometimes they had drawings and models in Warner's archive that we could draw on. Other times it really was a forensic effort to sort of, literally going frame by frame through the movie and trying to find out how they'd achieve things and how they got certain finishes and certain looks, specifically with the model in the attic set.
Once you pulled it off, that's the idea of when that flyer kind of flies down.
The attic, where it all happens. I loved my scenes with Jenna up there. They were the first that we shot together. That was the day that we just like locked in to each other on camera and off.
This attic is off limits, so it's, do you know what I mean? So it's like, come on, this attic is off limits, so this place is possessed.
I had to grab her and yell at her, and Tim kept having me do it louder and louder, and I felt like I was being a bit abusive to her. But she was such a great sport. Once that door opened, it never closed.
Actually, this attic is off limits. I'm serious.
Right.
Having Michael, Winona, and Catherine back in the film from film 1 to film 2 is a lot of fun because we wanted to keep the same vibe on this film to make sure that they had a playground to play in.
That was one of the joys of this for me, is working with the cast again, you know. I hated school, and I never went to high school reunions or anything, but I did feel like it was an amazing reunion that was just so beautiful. I hadn't seen many of these people for a long period of time, so it was a really beautiful experience.
We complement each other pretty well, I think, because we're really quite different, and in a lot of ways we're really like-minded or similar. The things we touch in common are strong.
So kind of do it pretty directly because it's kind of a little shock, like right to camera.
Yeah. I don't think I've ever seen such a wonderful director-actor collaboration. They almost finish each other's sentences. They're almost like the same person. It's absolutely mesmerizing to watch. And also the physicality of it.
Here we go.
I think Michael, when he performs Beetlejuice, the physicality, it's physically really draining. When you call cut, you can tell that actor has given every single drop of his soul into that performance.
My ex-wife is back.
The exciting thing about this film and the character Beetlejuice is that just like anything can happen. A prop can come out of nowhere. His costume can change out of nowhere. For instance, there's a scene where Beetlejuice starts telling the history of how he met Dolores. Beetlejuice suddenly has a microphone and he's telling the story to all the shrinkers like he's on stage.
He has a microphone.
Te lo dirò.
In the middle of the film, we have a sort of flashback sequence to the 1300s, which was interesting, and that's probably one of the bigger departures from the original film. There's nothing quite like that before.
Almost all my scenes are with Michael Keaton. Actually, we had to make an intimate scene, a funny scene, and we didn't know each other. It was fun to make it, and Michael was so kind. He has an amazing energy, and it was beautiful to see the creative connection between Tim and Michael. You could feel that they knew each other very well.
Hey, Tim, give me a separate cue, all right? Just say Michael. I'll say now. Yeah. Okay.
I always wanted to make an Italian horror film, so I got my chance to just dip into it a little bit. And that's what excited me about it. As much as I could connect any visual to something that meant something to me, it was very important. So for me, it was just one of my favorite things to shoot.
Is it read as good? It's kind of nice. It's more Italian stuff, you know? It's like Lady and the Tramp. Okay. That's better.
We'd planned on going out into the real world and building this big backlot set, but in the end, we went completely the other way and went to a very low-key, low-tech version where everything was built in little vignettes and everything was layered up, so you really could only shoot it from one angle. So there was a plague pit, there was a destroyed monastery, there was Beetlejuice's wedding night, there was all sorts of other little elements we had to shoot, and we shot them in a very clever way on camera as well, so they look like sort of old black and white, silvered chrome sort of effect.
Although we shot digitally, Tim is such an analog fan. I said, well, there is a company that has been experimenting with the most accurate addition of film grain to a digital image. And I've been speaking to them, and they have found 2 cans of black and white film from 1934, I believe, the oldest film stock available, and they hadn't developed it yet. The grain is absolutely beautiful, and I applied the nitrate grain on the footage, and he absolutely loved it. That's a director who pushes you in the right way for the right reasons, and I think it enhances the film, and I think it makes you feel like you're there.
Today we're on set rehearsing 20 dances for the Soul Train scene, where some dancers from the underworld come and board a train to the afterlife, the Soul Train.
A week or two before we started filming our Soul Train sequence, Tim called and said, this scene that we're shooting is a musical and that's how we have to treat it. And so we ended up really getting into the choreography.
I've got a text from Tim that it's like, I want funk and I want soul and I want cool. That's all he wants, right? That's what he's looking for.
Tim himself loves the Soul Train TV show, and so it's inspired from that.
As a child, I grew up in that era of television where you either had American Bandstand or Soul Train, and I was definitely more of a Soul Train. I used to watch it every Saturday. So it just sort of fit into the spirit of the movie and the spirit of the afterlife.
The Soul Train. The Soul Train platform was probably one of the hardest sets, actually, I think.
We found a train carriage, we found some great lights, we designed the departures board. I think that one feels quite Tim Burton-y with the sort of kind of handrails and the weird oblique arches and things.
We sort of mixed Stockholm with the New York Pneumatic Transit with bits of London Underground, and we just twisted it all up in a big ball and then stretched it back out again and refined it from there.
I've been lucky because I turned up like now towards the end, and then everyone's like, oh, you've been on the best sets because I got to see the Soul Train.
Visually, the set, the staircase that we're walking down, and that part of the underworld was so fascinating and so mind-blowing to me. I was watching and I thought, oh, this is so good, I wish I could be a part of it, and I forgot that I was in the scene.
Here we go, everybody. Ready, and action! Monica, come in.
Your soul belongs to me, my love, for eternity.
Take it. Take cut. I think we're done.
We shot 44 days in London, in the UK, and I think, you know, judging by the smile on Tim's face, and I know how much he enjoyed it.
I want to thank everybody for an amazing shoot, and I think that's our last shot, so thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
I think it was very emotional when we finally finished in London because it was quick and efficient and fast. The bonds that everybody formed were really sweet, and I think the cast as well, especially for Tim and the original cast. But we had more to do in America. Tim wanted to go back to shoot the original town from the original film in Vermont.
When Tim kind of insisted that we go back to the original location, some people may have questioned whether that's necessary, and sure, we can build it on a backlot in England somewhere. But once we arrived there, it was really breathtaking.
Going to America for Vermont, I think, opens up the film, and we're not on a backlot, and you'll know it from the moment it appears on camera. The original town for Beetlejuice is East Corinth, Vermont, and it is a character in our film. We're starting to hear stories of the past, people coming out of their homes and talking about the original film.
Here's Tim Burton with my Uncle Morris. He was Ernie in the film. Uncle was a thorn in his side because he didn't follow directions. As a matter of fact, when I spoke to Tim Burton last night, he remembered him.
Hey,
It's Beetlejuice here on the 4th of July. We're in Corinth, Vermont, where we celebrate Beetlejuice every day. It's what put us on the map.
It was very exciting for the people. A lot of the elder people in the village were very excited.
The town embraced us as well, and I remember walking the town with Tim the first time, and there were pictures of the original Beetlejuice like on different parts of the town.
We really, really wanted to go to Vermont. We really wanted to go over that bridge again. We really wanted to be at that house. There's such iconography there. There are certain moments that just tie the 3 decades together. And I think going to Vermont does that. What an opportunity for any filmmaker to make a film and then go and make another film years later with that family.
Well, that was interesting going back there to Vermont, because we're kind of wondering, well, what happened? You know, is it all built up? And it was actually strangely exactly the same. It was weird. You wouldn't go like, this was 35 years later. You go, oh, we were here like last week. But that was part of the vibe. That place was a little bit of a character, and it was like working with the people. It was an emotional thing to go back there, and it added something for me anyway to re-experience that place.
It's amazing that it's still here and that it hasn't changed a bit. In fact, Tim was saying that apart from a few things, it's more or less the same as it was. It's fantastic to be on the site and set of where it was originally.
Hey, come back, Justin!
Driving up to the hill and then you see the house there built, I was speechless. And then being up on that hill and looking over what is Winter River, you can tell why that location was chosen 35 years ago and why it was so important to come back there.
We built the house on the same hill that it was built in the 80s. The same family owned it.
They built the original house. They spent a year building it, I understand, the first time around. We did it in 7 weeks this time, so it was a little bit of a challenge. We pulled the original drawings from Warner Brothers. They still had them in the archives, which was fantastic. I thought we were going to have to try and figure it out from the film, but they actually had the original blueprints. And then we had to cover it in this veil. We spent a long time investigating different gauzes to see how transparent they were going to be. And then we had to basically buy all of it from around the world because there wasn't enough in any one place. And it was all assembled in giant pieces, and then very skilled drapes people were up in scissor lifts and genie booms. It was a job. It took them 2 weeks in the end, I think, to do the drail.
Being back there and seeing the house on the hill, you do feel transported back in time. It's remarkable. I remember just being on that porch with Catherine and Jenna and Justin, and he just wanted to soak it in.
Tim was quite insistent that once we were here, we had to get all the beats, which is absolutely right, you know.
We built, the hardware store because the building had been dilapidated, and cleaned up Miss Shannon's School for Girls and rebuilt the bridge.
More than one generation in the family of Beetlejuice going over that bridge on a bicycle. It is exactly the same bicycle. It is Lydia's bicycle that we used. We went to great steps to keep certain elements there. I don't think the film would have been the same if we hadn't gone back to Vermont.
It was a real challenge to try to figure out how to finish up. We had a looming active strike over us. Weather was coming in. There was a lot of different things coming at us.
When we caught wind of the approaching SAG strikes, there was definitely a ticking clock in the background, and we knew that our days were numbered. And I'm not sure anyone will forget that anytime soon.
Tim's a very efficient filmmaker, and he knew that we wanted to get out of there. We were supposed to shoot 3 days, and we went into the town and shot very, very fast for 2 days straight. Tim shot 7 pages in 1 day.
We managed to shoot about 2 days worth of work in 1 day.
We had a great crew from Boston that we had never worked with before, but we stepped into day 1 like it was day 39, and the crew was super efficient. We had a really fun time.
I realized when we finished shooting that it was like, we shot about the same amount of days as the first one. And I go, well, that's pretty impressive. I mean, not that anybody cares, and it's like, you don't make a movie to race to the finish line, you make it to make it. But, in trying to make it within the spirit of that, I was quite shocked afterwards to kind of realize that we kind of did it in the same time period.
We'd like to thank you all for coming to this very special occasion, but right now we'd like a little privacy.
The fun that everyone was having, I haven't seen that on a set in a long time. Everyone who worked on it, you could tell, really enjoyed showing up for work, because how often do any of us get to do that anymore?
It's really one of the best times I've ever had. Every moment on the set was like, this is so special. Like, be present for everything, because this doesn't happen. I know the expectations are high, and mine were so high. And so reaching it was really a great feeling.
There's a uniqueness to that just goes, against the grain of traditional filmmaking. And it's a privilege to make that kind of a film. And it's a privilege for an audience to have that experience as well.
I think Tim had a lot of fun doing it like the original. There were stressful days, but at the end, we all had fun doing it because it was the right way to do it.
The world of Tim is a kind of fantasy world that all different generations love. It's a kind of universe that touches all the souls in a very profound way.
Tim is seeing it all. He is seeing it all. He's just trying to express to us this amazing vision that he has. And he's so excited about what he's doing. It's great to see him as happy on this set as he was on the original.
It was a more satisfying experience for me than I've had in a long, long time. After years in the industry where I would get a little bit sidetracked or whatever, or I just was not interested in the business much anymore. It reconnected me to what I love, which is making a movie. And so, yeah, I really, you put out all the business stuff and you go right to it. And so, yes, I did have a very artistic, exhilarating, and emotional time. So, yes, if you call that fun, yes.
Should have got married in Vegas.